Samuel Moyn of Stupidity, Strauss, Heidegger, and there's some other part of the bad title. But anyway, I'll try to ask this question in the same tones as the original Fukuyama question. That's why I tried to mime the title of Fukuyama's original 89 article with a question mark, which I think was omitted from the book, somewhat unfortunately. But so let's ask the question, and the center topic will be the recent, it's a short, I think it's called the Review of Democracy podcast. And since at the center of that, we'll pretend Moyn is Straussian, and since at the center of the interview he mentions learned hand, I'll make that the core of the stupidity question. So, like, is he just adducing hand? So clearly we could rule out from the beginning he's not just adducing hand to name drop. That would be the worst thing. And then at the same time we'll superimpose comparison of Meno, Plato's Meno and Meno, who is a historical figure, with Moyn asking the same question about Meno. Is Meno stupid? And so then we could get some mise en abîme type of dynamism going, and see if we could terrify ourselves by this the wide application of this type of question. So I guess in the Meno version we could say there's one part of Meno that's obviously not stupid, is in that he really wants to know what arete is, because he thinks maybe he could get something out of it. That's always the Catholic thing, is like, is this guy just doing this because he thinks later on he can, it would be good for his reputation, and then he can say, look, I did this and this and this, and I deserve certain compensations, or you should recognize me for doing these things. So Meno, we could understand as having bad motives in that sense, but at the same time he has a genuine interest in finding out what arete, or virtue, or excellence, or the how is that, or as Cicero puts it, fortitudo, or fortitude, is all about. And so he throws his passions in a way, in a Adam Smith type of manner. He's self-interested. It's or whatever, Milton Friedman, Hayek, self-directed manner, which ends up through the invisible hand, or through the cunning of reason, producing some results. But on the other hand, he's also he's part of the school. He's into the sophist Gorgias, and he likes to quote Gorgias's views and the views of people kind of around him. So his almost name dropper, or culture vulture, as Strauss puts it, at one key place. He's just sort of admiring the beauty of certain formulations of the sophists concerning how the eyes work, how the something goes from the outside into the inside, and produces the image. So I guess we have in Meno kind of a mixed case, but okay. So in Moyn, do we have a mixed case? I'd say so. He's not name dropping per se, but but on the other hand, okay, one has to be entertaining one has to say the things that others say. And Moyn himself talks about living a interesting life, which is a much higher notion, but somehow it's almost like the lower form of an interesting life is an entertaining life, and then Nietzsche probes and says, well, isn't it true of all intellectual life that we have to be a little bit entertaining? But Nietzsche doesn't really say it that way. He says, why would we even bother if it wasn't interesting, with the kind of sense that it's the whole thing is not what it presents itself to be. Think of Ronald Dworkin. So let's see, it gets us into the content anyway. So that's Ronald Dworkin, cites Learned Hand, who he clerked for, and Dworkin is at the most powerful guy for a long time in terms of people like to hear him speak on topics like is there truth and interpretation, and the sort of topics in the law that touch on the deepest philosophic problems. And one of the anecdotes that he repeated several times in lectures and elsewhere was that Learned Hand, being a Christian, being a devout Christian, would like to speculate sometimes, had occasion to speculate on the afterlife, and in one version, the gist of it is, I don't know, after playing a round of golf and having drinks, people are sitting around, and then God says, shut up, Voltaire, I want to hear what Hand has to say. And so if you take that in the low way, it's just silly, because it's just like, oh, here's this egotist that wants to be heard instead of Voltaire. But if you take it in a higher way, and I don't know per se that it's not totally obvious to me that Ronald Dworkin understood it this way, the way he tells it, but I think it must have been how Learned Hand understood it. So what he understood must have been that here's Voltaire, this guy putting us in the wrong direction, even though he's known for his great epigrammatic wit and his much sought companion at his soirees, is nonetheless to be totally dismissed for Learned Hand, because Learned Hand is given his so let's jump into sort of unreality, but Learned Hand it's the direct reality, but it's not how he self-explicates his own saying. But Learned Hand, as I think in a way he would do, but what I'm saying is this is what he's thinking, this is my view, is when he's giving his talk, the Central Park talk, which is so famous for the short talk that ends possibly it ended in him giving the Roman salute, right? Because he's saying, one nation under God with liberty and justice for all, and in unity and whatever, or however it goes. And isn't that how it goes? But after that, when you salute the flag, there would be, if you're a progressive, you would probably say Learned Hand is a Nazi, and they gave the Nazi salute, and you would insist on that in the way they do about Elon Musk, right? So, and in a way, it's there's a lot of justification for that, in the sense that what he's thinking is, I want to hear, the reason God wants to hear not that atheist terror Voltaire, but Hand is a proponent of a socialist, in the sense of Thomas and Aquinas, view of this is the life worthy of a free man. That's the original meaning of liberal, of liberty, and then therefore of liberty, in its famous. And so Moyn quotes something along the lines of, if liberty dies in the hearts of men, then no constitution, no law, no judge, something like that will be able to set it right. So we say, so Hand is basically saying this is the truth. And so I'd say, well, let me make that clear. What I'm saying is, there's a general question, what's the good society? Then there's And this is something Strauss is saying all the time. And then people come out with these other formulations and act like it's not part of an answer to the question, what's the good society in Politeia? And then people say, oh, I want the open society, Soros, Popper, Soros, or I want the great society and welfare programs and other programs to improve society under the Texan president who came in after Kennedy. And I think of that because partially it has such a great pious feeling about it, the whole program. And so this is one of the things that I charge Moyn with as being merely saying the state propaganda, as it were. And therefore there's something stupid in merely repeating this program just because it's there, elaborating it just because it's there. I know there's big differences with the what I just sort of thinking of it in the lens of the way Unger talks about it. Yes, Holmes' whole program that he basically justifies through his discourse on the common law, where he says, "Oh, look, the basic pre-scientific, pre-legal suppositions are changing, and men want different things from their law, and we can't. Their law is a field of prospective conflict, and only the naive claim is it actually the retrospective peering into the pool at the Lake Nemi, which involves only the wisdom of the philosophers." So yes, I understand that's in there, but he's basically evoking learned hands, saying that there's this that law always has to be directly connected. It's not something that could ever be sequestered off and then only handled by experts, but it's always connected to what's in the hearts of the citizens. Let me give another superposition. Paul Shorey, who Strauss has praised as one of the top Plato scholars, in his translation of the Politeia or Republic says, unless philosophers become kings in the cities, or unless those now kings and rulers truly and fully practice philosophy, there will be no cessation from troubles for the cities, I think, the cities, or I think for the human race. That I throw in order to show there's a different view than the liberal view, and then the view that the life of the free man. That's like a fixed view. So that's where I would say there's possibly some thoughtlessness in it, and then I show that there's another view, the classical view, that could be understood in contradistinction to that. In the classical view, so in Olympiodorus, I just give a quick representation of the classical view is when the young Plato, about 11 years before Socrates dies, goes to the older Dionysius, the elder, and there's four things they discuss. Dionysius wishing to be flattered by the young nobleman who's been admitted into his court, asks him, what do you think Eudaimonia is? He says, Socrates shows what Eudaimonia is. Socrates was still alive at the time I'm mentioning in. And that annoys Dionysius. He's further annoyed by Plato's. In fact, actually, the text doesn't say anything about that, which is interesting. But about the second one, about what's the statesman. Word statesman is some form of the word politeia. And Plato gives Socrates' definition of decay or justice as that which improves the citizens. not sure that Dionysius is actually annoyed by that. But then he says, isn't it something that I played the statesman well, and the statesman's understood as this doctor that cures the disease once it's already happened, or as the, I guess there he puts it as the guy who mends torn clothes. And he says, the statesman's work is pathetic because you've already let things go wrong and then you have to mend them. That annoys Dionysius. And then he's finding this young man very tiresome. And then he takes the last step, and the fourth thing that they talk about slips my mind for the moment. But then but in any case, that shows some of the essence of what this kind of philosopher who would be there instead of the learned hand, basically invocation of the conscience of Jesus. I mean, he mentions Jesus actually, so in the talk, in the little Central Park talk, which may have ended in a Roman salute, I don't know, I repeat. But not that that's particularly important, but it just shows the oddity of the whole, all these comparisons of different times and how they're all flowing together in some way that's it's not really captured by saying we have an analogy, but we're transferring meaning somehow. Okay. So yeah, let me make that even. So I've found in a Catholic source a beautiful formula, which basically I would say learned and embodied or epitomized, which is the in what he believed, in the shut up Voltaire, I want to hear what Hand has to say, and then that's not a silly thing, but it's let's superimpose another level. So we could think at every point, let's do it in a Socratic fashion, which means at every point we could think, is what's said ironic in the Socratic sense? And then it's like, are we supposed to take this seriously or not? And then it's like, what people thought in Athens was sort of like Socrates makes these remarks that he has a funny way of, it's kind of like Columbo. If you take it as a joke, this little man with his shabby coat as a joke, or Socrates is 10,000-fold impoverished, as Strauss said amazing remark along those lines. Then you kind of feel, you take it as a joke, but then you kind of feel uneasy about it. But if you take it seriously, then you feel kind of stupid, like, why am I taking this thing seriously? That's sort of the trick of the Socratic irony, according to one prominent view, which has been accepted by a great many in the tradition. And so then we have this question with respect to Hand, and also with respect to Moyn's perhaps stupid taking up of the components of the project of learned hand in the form of this claim of the beautiful formula I wanted to mention was the conscience is the aboriginal vicar of Christ. So we could imagine that this liberty is this aborigine or original virtue-bearing entity, our conscience, the autonomous conscious in Kant, or total freedom. I mean, that kind of connects it up with liberty, freedom, liberty of the conscience. But of course, we know usually what this liberal project means is more like a specific tack of, in the learned hand sense, of keeping anything in the Jewish large sense that Samuel Moyn's saying of sort of lower power of government, which is something that the right wing and left wing both agree with. It's a unified liberalism in the sense of Burke is the first conservative, but therefore a conservative liberal. The power should be limited in some sense, and there should be not that would be kind of interesting, like a short exchange between Vermeulen and Moyn on the point of what does it mean that Thomas and Aristotle are socialistic in the older sense, that they don't believe exclusively in rights as liberalism, the rights of man and the citizen do, but they have they think that there's always this legalistic and also existential. I'll just use the word existential. It's total sense that the rights are real and objective things, but they also always necessarily go along with duties or obligations. Just as in the law, like property, you can't have the negative side of liability without the positive side of enjoying the benefits of having the property, something like that. But somehow liberalism only wants to have the benefit without the other connected part of it. There's some element of that seems to always. You could say these type of vague general opinions have some strong sense to them, even if they're not. Even if somehow, when you look at it very closely, it doesn't totally make sense, or they don't fit in with the strict view of some, probably many liberal, maybe it could be the majority of liberal thinkers, but everybody says that about liberalism. It's like that it's connected to rights, First Amendment right, Second Amendment right, and that is just, there's not that much talk about the obligations or the duties. Let's see, what else do we want to look at here? What's the other side? So I think, so there could be this secondary stupidity, which is, yeah, it's more like, it's a little bit like Meno's utilitarianism, that Meno wants to learn about arte for his own egotistical self-use, just like somebody who brings somebody food one day, but then they want it to be able to say in the future time, remember when I made you dinner or something like that. It's like a form of utilitarianism, I suppose. But in the same way, since Meno didn't really want to learn about what arte or excellence is for its own sake, or for the sake of the truth, but presumably for some lower motive, then there's something askew there. I think also there's something askew, and then therefore something stupid in a way, I would say, because it misses the mark. And because it merely perpetuates a project that's already presupposed without whereas one would want to break out of that into another project. And then Moyn kind of seems to do the same thing in a different way, in that instead of noticing that this liberal project is so already fixed, he just says, oh, wouldn't it be better if we intensified it by becoming more like a parliamentary state? Or it's almost like he's saying, oh, let's become more like England or something, and or Germany. And but why does that improve anything? That's just okay, so that's not going to change. That's not going to give you an English population which has the same kind of and of course England is having a lot of problems over immigration and something, and I guess sort of South African problems almost in a way, in that they're threatened with being swamped, as it were, by the incoming populations, which I don't know if that threat is really true. It's more true in France. I mean, the Hollenbeck. What I'm thinking about is that Hollenbeck type of submission scenario. There's some threat of something like that, but it's maybe in different gradations or different emanations. But yeah, if one assumes one has to be in the liberal mode in order, I don't think even to be progressive. So, and he mentions the progressives taking the legalistic side and calling this sort of this double consciousness, like we don't want to offend our colleagues, so we say everyone is above board and just doing their job and just saying what the law is, but then at the very next moment we're saying they have to find it this way because we don't care that you call us living constitutionalists, but this is how the law ought to be understood, or something like that, or that they're doing politics in some way. I guess if it's a right-wing, you could get somebody saying, "Oh, why are some of the justices being standing hawks? Why are they not getting involved in why aren't they casting their vote?" They say, "Oh, I'm going to abjure. I believe this case never had any standing. My colleagues are going on and voting on it, but I'm going to stay out." And then you could see the political side of that would be to say, no, they don't judge. Instead, they have to recognize that they're voting, and therefore, when their side needs their vote, they have to vote. They can't be standing hawks. Something like that. I think that's an example of what he has in mind by the supposedly sophisticated side rather than the naive side of this dispute, which he apparently wants to put a stop to by just dissolving the naive side, somehow discrediting it. So let's see, let's summarize then for a second. Is this whole thing, well, what are the alternatives? So there's all that, or there's something more like philosophy, and then I think one can see there's something more like philosophy being that the king would have more power instead of always being frightened of power, which in Unger's view just slows things down. The colder the stagnation, or the stagnation at the level of Brownian motion, or however he puts it, or one, you could say we don't necessarily need to have all the liberal projects in the way they look, and I suppose especially with respect to the terror about the concentration of power, which in fact is, if there was a great concentration of power, we could just institute a Calder tax, and that would solve infinite number of problems immediately. But so I don't know why it's necessary a priority to assume that there's how much does one have to assume that one has to talk to the current political situation? Why can't one propound a theory which might in the future be taken up, but given technology, given world communications, maybe we don't know how quickly such things could be adopted. And so on the whole, and on the other side of the stupidity problem, well, what's the other side? I guess it's the stupidity entertainment or stupidity boredom problem. How much is there a willingness to, so he's not really proposing anything that's changing just for changing, and less focusing on Judith Shklar because she's not the most, except that she's known for the liberalism fear thing, is not that well known. And then there's, we could analyze it that way too. Is how much does Moyn, in order to remain prominent in some way, apparently his name is cited as much as Jordan B. Peterson, which is interesting. But of course, maybe that depends on how you put in the names in the Google anagrams. But the one I did show that. So is it that he has also this formula to be boring in the right way, be boring in an entertaining way by choosing the right? Judith Shklar is just slightly off the most cited and known people, so he has a focus on her. Learned Hand is in the dead center, at least within people that are at law schools. The public probably doesn't know who he is. And also, I guess I'll just end this with the observation that he's the most apparently he's the most cited guy that was ever on the Supreme Court. So I guess he couldn't set policy quite as pretty potently, as the Supreme Court is said to do. But maybe his set policy, maybe he turns out to be the most prepotent of them all.